Welcome to 44 and 1 with GVizzle and Tempest. Like and subscribe, and here we go.
So, yeah, welcome back. A quick bit of housekeeping before we start.
Chris from the future here. I know my audio sounds a bit out of whack. I changed cameras in a bit and it sorts the sound out, so you don't have to put up with it for long.
So, since we're such a small podcast, we don't actually know what we do that our regular listeners and watchers enjoy. So if there's been anything over the last year and a half, over the last bunch of nearly 90 episodes that we've done, I know, can't believe it's so many, even with me dropping the ball by being ill, we still managed nearly 90 episodes.
Get your shit together, Chris.
Yeah. So if you go onto our YouTube version of the podcast and comment, like, just tell us what sort of stuff you like, what sort of segments you've enjoyed over the last year and a half, or email me. So my email is psychology.tempest@gmail.com.
Sure, we have a 44 and 1 email address.
Yeah.
You trying to keep secrets? You trying to get people to email you?
Yeah.
So you can hide your co-host as a bitch?
Exactly.
I can take it. I can take it.
How have you caught on to me so quick? That's amazing.
You're very transparent.
You know me too well, and because I'm autistic, I can't hide things.
You think you're clever, but you're not.
That's true. I'm only clever at one thing, and that's data analysis. I'm a knobber with everything else. So anyway, yeah, you had something you wanted to tell me about.
The man versus bear. I know I'm sick of hearing about it, but I need to talk about it. I don't know how long ago it started. I haven't seen the original TikTok videos. I actually haven't seen any TikToks about it. Everything I've seen about it has been on Reddit, and people are mad. So the premise is, I believe this is the premise. A woman was walking up to women on the street asking them, would you rather encounter a man or a bear in the woods? And a lot of women said bear. Also, a lot of women said bear that we know of, because clearly it was edited to show what she wanted to show.
Yeah.
So men now are losing the plot, to borrow a phrase, because they immediately have gone to violence. That bear's going to tear you apart, blah, blah, blah. But so they're very, very angry about the whole thing. A lot of Reddit has there's a new subreddit called Man v Bear. It's in almost every subreddit I've seen has some conversation about it. And like, men are big mad about it, which is hilarious because they were telling us we should be mad about being compared to locks and keys. But now there's a whole other, would you rather stick your dick in a woman or a snake? Would you rather have a car driven by a man or a bear? Like, it's gotten absolutely ridiculous. And At no point have, men sort of self-reflected to be like, oh, that's kind of fucked up that women would rather see a bear in the woods than a man. Maybe we should consider that. And also women are like doubling down on the whole thing. So it's taken on a life all of its own.
That's amazing.
And
I can't believe I've missed all of this. This is glorious.
You haven't been on TikTok in a while. It started on TikTok, and admittedly, I go on TikTok, I upload videos, and then I bounce out. Like, I've got about 300 messages waiting for me, and I'm scared. So I see it on Reddit, and it first started in a couple of the smaller subreddits that I would expect. So it was in like the men's rights subreddits because they were angry and calling it double standards and blah, blah, blah. And then it moved over to purple pill debate, which is just as bad as any other subreddit, even though they try to make it sound like it's better. And then it moved over to these unpopular opinion debate subreddits and true unpopular opinion and change my view. And now it's all over the place where you cannot get away from this fucking bear.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the opinion of 0.0000001% of women that was shown on the TikTok drove these men to insanity.
And they immediately, and even women have said, I'm an avid hiker. I've seen bears in the woods, and unless you're threatening them or their cub, they're likely going to leave you alone. We're not talking about polar bears. We're talking about the average bear.
It depends on what they're talking about. Like, a grizzly will rip you apart just for fun. Sure. But they're probably seeing brown bears.
But like the people are pulling out stats like your odds of being attacked by a bear 1.2.1 million. So even if you encounter a bear in the woods, it's not like grizzly bears are so prolific that you're going to find them everywhere. And this one woman actually shared a story. She's like, she was on a hiking camping trip and she had a guide. She was with 3 of her female friends and they encountered a bear in the woods. Like 3 times they saw bears and all 3 times they stopped to like, oh my God, look at the bear, take pictures, keep your distance. And the guide was make big noises so the bear knows that you're here and they don't want to confront you, they'll back off. So she's like, that's my encounter with bears in the woods. On that same trip, they get to this hot springs and there's 2 men in the hot springs. So the guide says, etiquette is we find a different spot so that we can maintain privacy. Yeah. So their group goes to the other end of the hot springs. And wouldn't you know, one of the guys swims on over and he starts chatting up the women. Where are you camping? Why do you stay in the hot springs? Why don't we come back here tonight? So they left. They're like, we're not interested. We're not like, we're doing this trip on our own. Yeah. This same guy then shows up at their campsite a few hours later with his friend, and his friend you can see is clearly uncomfortable because the guy is, now he's getting angry at the women for not wanting to go to this hot springs with him, and he's getting frustrated, and his friend was like fuck, let's go. And then he finally went, and the women were now like, shit, should we take shifts sleeping? Like we don't know who this guy is. So she's like, that right there is exactly why I'd rather encounter a bear in the woods.
I think, I think a lot of men miss the point. It's not really about actually encountering a bear, because most of those women probably haven't given a thought to encountering a bear in the woods. The women that answered the question, right? Yeah. Your average everyday person knows nothing about bears. But what women do know a lot about is men. Exactly. And all you need is that. I mean, 'cause it's 10% of men, right, that behave badly. And you think about how many hundreds of women that they're going to encounter, or thousands of women in their lives, and how many of them are they going to either go from just making them feel uncomfortable all the way to sexually assaulting or murdering them, right, in the most extreme case. And you think that 10% of men fit within that range somewhere. Even though 90% of men are fine, 10%. That's like if you've got 1 million men, 100,000 of them are dodgy.
It's not like we can tell. Jimmy Garofalo had that bit. I think we talked about it before. That people's walks should be indicative of their motives. You don't know. And even the most reasonable men. The thing with a lot of these men is that they immediately went to rape and murder. And they're always like, oh, women are so irrational. They walk around thinking all men are going to rape and murder them. It's like, no, we don't believe that. But we know that they go to the extreme. When a coworker of mine was grabbing coffee before work, she walked out of a coffee shop and a guy, well-dressed guy, on his way to work, presumably, looked like a professional, asked her for her number, and she said, no, I'm married. He's like, well, that doesn't bother me. And she's like, I'm not interested. And he spit in her face and called her a cunt. Right? So it's like a lot of these men immediately go to rape and murder when they're not seeing the consistent and constant interactions that women have that leave them feeling like, fuck, I can't even make eye contact and smile at somebody passing by because they're going to follow me for an hour. They're not getting that part of it. Women, on the other hand, instead of trying to explain this to a lot of these men, to say it's not really about the bear, this is what it's really about. Yeah. They just double down and get even more aggressive about it. So it's just created more of a divide, but people cannot let it go. They can't let it go.
Right. So if we're looking at all of the bears, right? So you're a woman just tottering along on her own in the woods, right? And then you encounter a bear. And if you meet a brown bear, you're thinking, okay, I'm probably going to be okay.
Okay, I actually mess up a bit here. I'm actually thinking of the black bear, not the brown bear. The brown bear is a subtype of the grizzly bear and is much less violent and aggressive than the grizzly. But I did intend to say the black bear here because what I'm saying fits more with that.
And then you meet a grizzly bear, you're like, well, I'm probably going to be fucking dead in a minute if I don't get the fuck out, right? And then you meet a polar bear, you're like, well, why are you in the woods, for one thing? Secondly, I'm definitely fucking dead. But the thing is, in those three scenarios, you can tell just by looking at it what is probably going to happen. And you can tell by the demeanor of the bear.
And then I guess it's obvious where I'm going with this, that you meet a man in the woods. Men can hide their demeanor. They can change their tactics. We're a lot more complicated in terms of our social behavior and our norms. And we can hide our intentions really fucking well so that somebody else doesn't know what your intentions are going to be. Because you could change, and you could change your mind about what you're doing. A grizzly tends not to do that. It's like, I'm going to fucking eat you.
Because, yeah, grizzly isn't consciously attempting to manipulate you. And a lot of men who are bad actors don't think they're bad actors. Like if you were to talk to that guy in the example I gave you who was inviting women to the hot springs, he wouldn't think he was being predatory. He would have thought he was just, I'm being a nice guy. I want to invite them to the woods, to the springs.
Yeah.
And maybe one of them will touch my pee-pee. Like,
Yeah.
The men who got so pressed about the bear are probably the men who should be reflecting on why that is, because there's a reason women are choosing the bear.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's taken on quite a significant life all its own. And then when women in the comments are commenting on it, men are still calling them emotional. It's like, you're like, there's 100 threads about this man and the bear, and women are still emotional.
And I think what I find annoying and frustrating about it as a guy is that the kind of men that are getting bent out of shape about it, most of them are that 10% of guy that I mentioned earlier. The 10% that is going to go like, I mean, we've all made people uncomfortable as by accident, right? But these men kind of do it as it's just a way of life, for fuck's sake. And and you just got to think like the what they need to understand is that the amount of women whose lives they negatively affect, and men's lives as well, like some of them offend against men, and you just the sheer number of people that they can affect in just a day. Like I've said before about this guy that who was in that service I used to work at. He was heavily autistic and a sex offender. And literally within a day, if he was out on the street on his own, he could commit 200 sex offenses in a day. He would be that prolific.
And those are the men that no one else, these men aren't thinking about. They all immediately went to rape and murder, and even some of the women said, I'd rather be mauled by a bear because it'll be painful but quick than tortured and raped and then left for dead.
And people will believe you, and they won't say, why were you walking in the woods? What were you wearing?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. It was kind of funny the first day or two, and now it's just gotten so much worse, and the comments get so much uglier, and it's now there's other guys in the comments who were like, just you bitches wait until we get AI girlfriends. It's like,
yeah. I think it'll be good if they get AI girlfriends and I'll leave everyone alone, and then we won't have them ruining it for the rest of the men.
That's the thing. Like, the kind of guy who's going to get an AI girlfriend is not the kind of guy who women are clamoring over anyway. And they're going to be here's my prediction. Because AI robot girlfriends are going to be so unbelievably expensive. The average guy isn't going to be able to afford one. So you're going to have like groups of guys getting together to pool their money to buy an AI girlfriend to share amongst them. And then after none of them are going to want to touch her because she's been ran through.
Yeah, digitally ran through. Didn't Bill Burr have a bit about that? Like with like a fembot type thing? And then you'd end up getting like the hand-me-down robots and some hobos just doing it under the bridge.
Eventually they'll be like old blow-up dolls.
Yeah.
There was this really, really gross movie I saw once. Oh, I forget what it was called. But these two teenagers find this kind of zombified woman tied to a bed in this old, I think they go on this like, oh, let's go investigate the old creepy hospital.
Just a quick heads up, this segment gets a little bit dark, so if you don't want to be exposed to that today, just skip to the next chapter.
And they find this zombified woman. And she's still, zombie alive, but she's strapped to this bed, so they decide, of course, we're going to fuck her. And then one guy just keeps going back and back and back and back. And then he's like, when he's grossed out by his own mess, he starts like cutting into other parts of her body to...
Oh, man. Oh,
I
I do not want to see that movie.
regret seeing it. I regret seeing it.
Dear Lord, you're into some weird stuff on Pornhub, eh?
But I think that was on Netflix. No, maybe not. I think it was like a B movie that I downloaded or something.
It's on
out of curiosity,
Beanflix.
without knowing that was where it was gonna go. It was just like two teenagers find a zombie. I'm like, oh, all right.
Yeah. There was a German movie, Stalingrad, which I found amazing that a German movie is about how they got their ass kicked in Stalingrad from the Germans' perspective. And they find a Russian woman tied to a bed and has obviously been ran through, to use their lovely turn of phrase. And then the guys are like the sergeant's like, all right, guys, we'll go in rank order. Lieutenant goes first. And the lieutenant's like, hey, no, let's let her out. She could probably give us some information. Let's be gentlemen about this.
That's the thing. I saw this other post on a whole other different thread, is that this woman was talking about her grandmother. Before her grandmother died, she decided to write her memoirs, and her grandmother was in the war. And American troops came to their village to help them and then ended up raping her entire family. So it's like, even on both sides.
Yeah.
Your enemies are going to rape you because they don't see you as a person, because they're your enemies, and your saviors are going to rape you because you should be thankful that they saved you. So either it was just bad news bears for everybody.
Yeah. And you never really hear about the Allies doing it. Like, the Allies committed war crimes too, and you never hear about it. And like the Russians, when the Soviets were coming through East Germany, they were like raping grandmothers, old ladies, kids. It's fucking awful.
We're watching MASH now, and I mean, they don't really get into the dark side of GIs raping anyone, but these GIs are having relationships with these South Korean women, and they have these South Korean children, like these half South Korean, half American children, and the problems that solved are created because these children would never fit into South Korean culture because they're half white.
Do you mean Vietnamese? Oh, they're in Korea.
Yeah, they're in Korea. So they would never be able to fit into that culture because they're half white, and then they aren't being taken home by their fathers who were there. So there were all these children that were just left in orphanages to live this terrible existence because of that.
Yeah. This is why I like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, because they cover all of that. Like with the Bajorans and Cardassians and stuff. Like Deep Space Nine gets really fucking dark, especially for Star Trek. People have no idea. Like, people need to watch that show, man. They really deal with some dark stuff. And there's like all of these half Bajoran, half Cardassian children that are just left in these orphanages because, like, the Cardassians were basically, the undertone is they're raping all these Bajoran women and keeping them as concubines. And then you've got these kids left over. Dark shit.
This episode got really dark.
Yeah. No, there was another movie. What one was it? I've totally forgotten now. This is the gabapentin. This is what's going to happen now. So I'm going to keep forgetting what I'm saying because of my gabapentin.
You should start taking notes.
Yeah, that's what I've done today for the episode, as I've written down what we were going to talk about.
Well, while you're trying to remember, I'll share an interesting fact with you I just learned. That have you ever seen the movie The Sound of Music?
Kind of. Bits of it.
So the movie, it's probably about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie. And the first half of the movie is this like love story. This nun who is a flibberty-gibbet, a will-o'-the-wisp. She is now sent to the Von Trapp family because he's a widower. He has 7 children. They need a nanny. So she goes in. He's very regimented. He's got this girlfriend. Everybody falls in love, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of music and singing. And for the first hour and a half, you're like, what a delightful love story. Then the Nazis show up. And then they have to escape Austria and escape the Nazis. And every time I watch the movie, I forget about the Nazi part of it because I'm like, I'm like singing along, and then I'm like, oh yeah, because it's like 2 movies in one. For its original German release, a branch manager at 20th Century Fox in Munich cut out the whole part of the movie with the Nazis. He just ended it as a love story.
They live happily ever after.
Yeah, they live happily ever after. He didn't get permission to do it, but then when the director found out, they made them re-release it. But for like a while, it was running with just the first 2 acts of the movie.
Oh wow, that's amazing. But yeah, talking about men being weird. So I've come across this weird sort of Japanese fashion. Okay, I think it's called Lola, like, and it's a play on Lolita.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's Japanese women and girls. They like to dress in quite neotenous clothes, quite childlike clothes. And then they don't see anything wrong with it. And like, you know, I'm not judging the women for being interested in this. Fashion's fashion, right? But I don't think they realize that they're being exploited as a gateway for this thing called lolicon. And lolicon is what you would expect would come out of women and young girls dressing as, you know, quite provocative clothing as young girls. And it's a lolicon is basically the paedophile version. And I've got a clip to show you what it looks like. Okay. And if anybody's listening to this and I'm not actually showing the Lola fashion, do let me know, and I'll I'll correct myself. But share screen. Right. Can you see it?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So you shared something like that with me, and I misinterpreted it. I thought it was like a cheerleader type of thing, because that has the same feel to me as American cheerleaders.
Yeah. But like, this is if I could find it. Okay, I've got a different clip here. And like, this is just from some kind of event, I think. So I'm not really sure why they're doing this particular dancing and all that. This is just to show the fashion.
So similar dance moves or same dance moves and same music?
Yeah, they do like a lot of different stuff. Like my fucking feed got filled with it. It was a bloody nightmare. Thankfully it's stopped now. I've retrained my algorithm, but it was a nightmare for a few days. But it's just like, so the fashion is guided very much by this neotenous look, and you know, like, women in their 20s are dressing up like schoolgirls, and they're making all this high school girl outfits like sexy.
So this is so it's not, because those clips will look like dance routines and part of a performance. Is it more than that, where they're actually out in their everyday lives?
Yeah.
Dressed like that?
Yes. Yeah. And then there's like all this stuff around it, like like photo shoots and looking sexy and provocative and wearing skimpy clothes, and it's all a bit like the women are doing it innocently because they're into the fashion.
It's giving me Toddlers in Tiaras vibes.
Yeah.
But not as creepy, because Toddlers in Tiaras were like 5-year-olds that they were dressing up to look like they were 35 and then parading them around.
And this is the other way around, 35 or 25-year-olds dressing up like 12-year-olds.
Oh, it's kind of creepy on both sides.
Yeah.
If you had a child, if you had a daughter and she said, "Dad, I want to get into the beauty pageant circuit. I really, really want it," would you let her do it?
No. Absolutely not. And I would make sure that she knew why, because it's not because of her and her interests, and it's not because of there's nothing wrong with her reasons. Like, she hasn't done anything wrong. If she wants this outlet, we can find different ways for that outlet. But beauty pageants are exploitative, and they're there just for the male gaze and for them just to whack off to young girls. That's my opinion.
so grossed me out when they
Yeah.
became a TV series for years and people forced their daughters into it.
Yeah. And there's like, because there's like, not all of the mothers, but quite a number of them are living vicariously through their kids. And then on the other side of it, you've got like these men, like, why would you be a male judge of a beauty pageant?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are you getting out of it? It just doesn't fit.
It's a weird thing to be into as a grown.
Yeah, and then that's what I think about like this Lola fashion. That why are you, like, you as the guy, why are you interested in that? And like, I was reading the translations of a lot of the comments, and there's a lot of sexual intent behind the comments.
Oh.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, she's so cute, look at her glasses and all that stuff, and they pick out neotenous bits about them and talk about how beautiful that is.
There's a woman, I don't know if it was on or which platform she was on. I know she was on TikTok, and there were a bunch of other creators who were trying to get her accounts removed because she was always posting videos of her toddler in like, here's my 3-year-old, my beautiful 3-year-old girl. Like, she was a stunning little girl, blonde hair, big blue eyes, just a gorgeous little girl. Here's my little girl eating a hot dog. And the comments,
oh yeah,
like, it was so purposeful. And there was one where the toddler was sitting on a chair and then she fell back and her legs flew up in the air. And in the video, you know, on TikTok, when you post a video, it grabs the very first slide as your thumbnail. The mother purposefully chose the thumbnail to be with the little girl with her legs up in the air. So people have been trying to get her banned. They've tried to comment, and there's a lot of steam behind that movement. People have called children's services, and then there are other women who were like, they're just jealous. They're just jealous of your beautiful daughter.
Oh no!
Comments of these, like, the men in the comments, and the mom is reading these comments and not protecting her child. Like, you know, you may have wanted to post your beautiful daughter online, but as soon as you get that first comment of, I wish I was that hot dog, you shut that shit down.
Yeah. Totally. You don't post videos that look like that ever again. And then you learn from it. Disable the comments for one thing, but she's harvesting the engagement. Like, I presume she's not deleting the comments.
She's thriving. I think she's living vicariously through it, as in, like, look at all these people who were saying my daughter is beautiful. I made her, so I must be beautiful too. Like, it's just this. Oh
yes,
get a dark.
As if we were dark before. Talking about the bears.
So you had something else. Did you have something else you wanted to talk about? Because I have a hypothetical scenario for you.
Oh, go for the hypothetical. Yeah.
It's based on a series of books I just finished listening to. It was by a Japanese author, and they've been translated into English. And it starts with a book called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Here's the premise. There's a cafe. And if you sit in a certain chair in this cafe, you can go back in time. There are rules, however. You can only visit that cafe. So whatever point in time you're going to has to have happened in the cafe. You cannot get up from the chair. If you try to stand up to shake someone's hand, you'll immediately be transported back to the present. You have a finite amount of time. You start going back into the past when your coffee is poured, and you have to finish the coffee before it gets cold to come back, or you're stuck, like you're a ghost, essentially. So you've got maybe 30 minutes. It has to have happened in the cafe. And nothing you do in the past will change the present.
Right.
So if you go back to try to tell someone don't get on the airplane, they're either not going to get the message, or something will happen, they'll get on the plane. So you can't change the present. What would cause you to get into that chair?
But I can come back.
As soon as you finish your last sip of coffee, you're transported back to the present.
Okay. And then do I pick the cafe?
It's that cafe. The cafe there's the ghost. There's a ghost who sits in that chair, and she just sits there reading. She gets up once a day to use the bathroom. And when she goes to the bathroom, that's when you can sit down in the chair.
Yeah.
and start your coffee, first sip, you go back when your coffee starts to get cold, and there's, in later versions of the book or later iterations of the book, there's a spoon in it that starts to beep when it's time for you to drink it.
Yeah.
So you can come back, because if the coffee gets cold, you then replace the ghost in the chair.
How do I get back then?
You finish the coffee.
So I have to drink the coffee before it gets cold.
Yes.
But then, oh, that's scary though, because sometimes, like, how many times do you watch something interesting and forget that your coffee's there, and then it gets cold?
That's why they put the beeping spoon in it. because the woman who's stuck in the chair, spoiler alert, the woman who's stuck in the chair went back to talk to her daughter, and then she lost track of time, and the coffee got cold, and now she's a ghost. So people have gone back. So the biggest thing for me when I first heard it is because nothing that you do changes the present. So it's not like you can go back and bet on a team, a sports event, to win $1 bajillion, because when you get back to the present, you'll have won it, but then you'll have squandered it and it's gone. So everything is this.
Yeah. And then, sorry, I'm not sure if I understood. Are you able to go to any cafe?
No, it has to be that cafe, and you have to visit a point in time.
Yeah.
Had to happen in that cafe. So if you had a conversation with someone in that cafe, you can go back to 30 seconds before that conversation started to rehab that conversation. If you met someone in the cafe, if the person you want to go back to see has never been in that cafe, you're just going to sit there and enjoy a coffee in the past. Like, you're not.
Yeah. So I don't understand what the value is in going back.
So in the book, and I thought the same thing at first, because you can't leave the chair, you can't leave the cafe, you can't do anything. But what people then come back with oftentimes is a different understanding of events and closure.
Right.
So there was one scenario, because it doesn't follow one person. So each book has different stories of different people that have sat in the chair. And then they actually changed. The first book is just this woman's trying to prevent a breakup. But when she goes back, she understands the reasons for the breakup that he didn't articulate before. And then there's another version of people going back to say goodbye to loved ones who are going to pass on. They want to have that closure. But it doesn't change the events of the present, but it changes your perception of what happened. So two sisters owned, or their family owned an inn, and one of them didn't want to stay and run the inn, so she fucked off to the city and left. Her sister would come down once a year to try to convince her to come back and work at the inn, and she would bail on her sister. She wouldn't listen to what she had to say. She thought her sister wanted her to take over so she could take off and live her own life. So she was, fuck it, I'm not going back. Her sister goes to the cafe to meet her. She doesn't show up. As her sister is leaving the cafe, she gets to a car accident, she dies. So now she's like, I got to go back and have that conversation. So she goes back and has the conversation. She knows her sister's going to die, but she wants her sister to die happy. So she says to her sister, I'm going to come home and take over the inn. And then her sister was like, oh my God, this is my dream come true. We're finally going to do this together. All I've ever wanted is for us to do this together. So then that was her moment of like, oh shit, it wasn't her sister being spiteful and trying to get her to take over so she could leave. It's because she wanted them to do it together. So her sister left happy, and now she understood what her sister's motivations were, and then her actually go back and take care of the inn in honor of her sister. So all the scenarios are like that. You come back with like, okay, I get it now, and I feel more at peace with how that situation.
So can you use a phone? Like, if you haven't gone to the cafe, how are you going to speak to someone?
They have to have been in the cafe.
Then I just feel like it's really pointless. How am I going to go back? So like, my family are uncouth barbarians. They don't go to cafes. I do. They don't.
I think you're getting hung up on the wrong bit here. So let's.
I think I don't really understand it. I think I'm just too autistic to get it.
So the first scenario is this girl, and the writer doesn't do an amazing job writing women.
Surprise, surprise.
The first story, this girl, her boyfriend tells her to meet him at the cafe. She thinks he's going to propose, but he's like, I got a job in America, so bye. And so she's like, the fuck? She goes back to their past. She is accomplished, successful. She speaks 6 languages. She is fast tracking in her career. He is a quiet little introverted incel, essentially, until they meet. And then she's like, why is he leaving me? And so It's just a very bizarre relationship. But then when she goes back, learns, why he actually did the breaking up. So you learn something new. So let's just pretend. God, aggressive eye roll for people listening. That there's a situation you want to go back to get some clarity. I think that's what you would do. You would go back to gain clarity or closure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like to know what my my real dad, what the fuck is the story there? Because
perfect example.
Yeah, because if you're listening for the first time, my mum is a grade A platinum level cunt, and
don't sugarcoat, Chris. We can take it.
Yeah, and I know that upsets some people, but she's an awful human being of the worst kind. And so I would like to know why my dad just kind of ditched me, basically, because I don't think it was his fault, but I would like to know for sure.
That is a perfect example of where you can go back to.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to know is, I think my grandmother, because I obviously experienced my grandmother through a certain light, and then sort of rose-tinted spectacles, because she actually bothered to be a grandmother to me, where she didn't to my cousins. And I would like to know why that was, because she was closer to my mum for some reason, but I think my mum actually put effort later on to kind of be around my grandmother, whereas her other kids didn't, because they were quite scarred by their upbringing. And I only have what I know of my family and also my mum's perspective. And knowing how my mum twists things, I would like to know what went on. Because it feels like my grandmother, she couldn't be around for her kids, basically, because she had Crohn's disease. And having Crohn's disease in the 60s was...
It's not a walk in the park now.
No.
I can't imagine what it was like.
So she was in hospital a lot. And I know my oldest uncle judges my grandmother because she had an affair with his best mate. Which, see, I think that's amazing. So I think that the rest of my family kind of judge my grandmother for her decisions, whereas I don't, because I know what my grandfather was like. He was a horrible man. And so basically, when my grandmother was in hospital, instead of beating her up, he beat his kids up.
Oh.
Right? And so I think they have a lot of misdirected anger. But again, it would be nice to know for sure and to actually ask her, like, wait, Gran, what the fuck happened? Like, you know? Yeah. It'd be very interesting to know, because I like to know why people are the way they are. I mean, that's why I did psychology, is to help figure that stuff out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sorry if that was too dark for people. I'm quite detached from it now. But it'd be interesting to know.
That's very interesting. I don't know what I would go back to. Like, I don't think I need any closure on stuff, but I would have liked... I kind of see my grandfather the way you see your grandmother with these rose-tinted glasses. And the majority of my life, he was hard of hearing. He had terrible hearing aids that just squealed constantly, so he could never really hear. So I knew that I adored him, but I have absolutely no idea what he was like as a person.
Yeah.
I would love to just be able to go back and sit and just have a conversation with him where we could hear each other and understand each other, because we would spend a lot of really lovely time together in silence. Like, we would go for walks, and we'd be arm in arm, and I remember, like, I would try to match my pace, my gait with his, so we would be in step, and he would see me watching our feet, and then he would skip to mess it all up. And
oh, brilliant.
He was just awesome. But in my memory of that, I've never been able to just sit and, like, my brother has these amazing memories of him, because when he was younger, they would sit and talk for hours because my grandfather could still hear properly, and then by the time I came around and was old enough to appreciate him, he couldn't hear, so we couldn't really.
And is it on your mum's side or your dad's side?
My mom's side. My dad's, my paternal grandfather died when I was 9. He was like, I have fond memories of him too, but they're could have clouded by he was really young when I died. When I was really died, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's a bit of a faux pas. Yeah, I kind of think I'm a bit philosophical about it when it comes to grandparents, because it almost doesn't matter to an extent. I mean, if your granddad was Hitler or Goebbels, then I'd change what I'm about to say. But I think for the most part, it doesn't matter what your grandparents were like as people. It matters what they were like to you, because they're different people when they're parents compared to grandparents.
And my grandmother was a difficult woman. And so my mom and I would have conversations about my grandmother. And then she'd be like, oh, your grandfather wasn't a peach either. And I'm like, shush, 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 don't ruin him for me.
Yeah.
I don't want him ruined for me.
Yeah, like it was just for example about how people can see people so differently. Like I remember just talking to one of my cousins. He's about my age. He's like the school year above me, and he was just talking about, like, we just casually mentioned my grandmother, and I don't think he realized how close I was to her. She died when I was like 10, and he was like, oh yeah, she was a proper slut though. And I was like, and what bearing does that have on your life? It's up to her, dude.
And by proper slut, he probably meant she slept with 2 men.
Yeah. No, she got about. She once she made out with a pilot at an air show so she could fly in the Lancaster bomber in the air show.
That's amazing.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
I want Rennie.
Yeah. She's a fucking legend. And she used to like play pranks. She was pranking people all the fucking time. And like, so my other uncle, the nice one that passed away recently, he had like a sales meeting where he had to speak to he had a team of like 7 or 8 salesmen. And then he had to go in and give them like the morning talk on like a Monday morning to get them raring for the week. And he didn't know why everyone was giggling and smirking. And he found later on that he'd been walking around all fucking morning with it, and he had no idea. My grandmother got up extra early and sewed a nice white fluffy bunny rabbit tail to the back of his trousers.
Oh my God, I love her.
Yeah. And then when I used to get ready for bed at night, sometimes she would sew the ends of my pajamas shut so I couldn't put them on.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah.
She was much more engaging, where my maternal grandmother was very protective and scared of life.
Mm.
She just, I mean, I think I've told you stories. She wouldn't open the refrigerator door without putting a towel over her head.
Really?
Because the chill of the refrigerator would cause some sort of illness. And you have 2 windows open in a car at the same time. You couldn't walk around barefoot because it would affect you wouldn't have a solid stream of pee ever again. And you couldn't, if you were outside wearing glasses, you couldn't take your glasses off, because when you took your glasses off, your eyes were no longer protected, and then the wind would cause you to lose your eyesight. If you had a hot drink and cold food, or vice versa, it would cause your teeth to fall out. Ate fish while you were on and drank milk, it would give you vitiligo.
Wow.
If you couldn't eat fish on your period, you should wear a hat for the first 3 days and not lie in the sun, because the blood will cook inside your body. Like, she was
wow.
full of these like crazy theories and nonsense. She told me once when I was a kid I shouldn't drink so much water because it would rust my braces in my mouth.
Wow.
And you couldn't, she firmly believed as soon as I would see her, I'd give her a hug and she'd grab my hair and squeeze it to make sure it wasn't damp, because she believed that you got sick from going outside with wet hair.
Oh, yeah, that's
And not, like, she didn't believe in viruses, and we would try to explain to her about, like, how viruses work and how you have to wash your hands, and she would mock us. Like, we'd be in the hospital visiting somebody, and then she'd be like, well, don't forget to wash your hands. Like,
she's mocking people for crazy ideas.
But she lived to be 99. Like, maybe she was on something.
Well, I think, like, if you're so scared of life and exposing yourself all the time, you're not going to have Just, I don't know.
I don't think she ever really had fun.
No.
Never let herself. She still ate like it was 1950s Portugal. She'd never had a hamburger or French fries or soda or any, like, she just never experienced. She didn't already know. But if she would, but in her later years, after my grandfather passed away, she moved in with my parents, and so she had a bedroom on the second floor. She would get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to wash her hair, and she had thin, wispy, 90-year-old woman hair, and then she wouldn't come downstairs until noon because she was worried that any breeze she got from coming down the stairs and her hair was damp would cause her to get sick.
Wow. Could you imagine like what the inner world is like?
She had a story for everything too. You couldn't, and if you were sitting in a car window and the sun was coming through the window, you should be really careful when you open the car door, because the breeze, when you open the car door on your hot face, would cause nerve damage. Because she was like, and then her face was like this.
You get
Someone else
palsy.
was, she was ironing and her face was hot from the iron, and then the doorbell rang, and when she opened the door, she got a breeze, and her face was like this. It was constant.
Wow. That's neuroticism, that, isn't it?
And she'd call me up, and she would let the phone. But we'd never had an answering machine when I was a kid, so the phone would just ring and ring and ring. And if we didn't answer it by like the fourth or fifth ring, then you had to answer this litany of questions when you answer the phone. So we would just like let it fucking ring, like pretend we're not home. She would let it like 60 or 70 times, and then it would hang up and then call back again.
Wow.
And she would spray on the phone, like when phones changed. So after a certain number of rings, they were like, "Bitch, they're not home," and they would.
Yeah.
She couldn't grasp it. She's like, "What happened?" She would just keep.
Yeah, they'll be home at some point, and I have to get hold of them.
Yeah.
Oh my word! The days before answering machines. Could have unplugged it.
She was a lot. My mom used to say when I was a kid, she's like, "I know this is terrible, and when one of them goes, the other one's gonna come live with us. I just hope you're first."
But she didn't. No.
She lasted a long time.
Did she live with your parents for 25 years, or was it just the end bit?
It was just the end bit. So after my grandfather passed away, she wouldn't have done well on her own, so she moved in with my parents. So it was still quite a while. So my grandfather passed away when I was 33, so 16 years ago. And then my grandmother passed away, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. So it was about just over a decade.
Oh, okay. It's still a long time, though, eh?
Still a very long time.
You do less for rape.
The one thing I do appreciate about my grandmother is I not appreciated it until I did. She would always give me a hard time about my dog. So we had Dally at the time, who was a 100-pound dog. She was German Shepherd, Rottweiler, Collie mix. So she was like a big dog. And my grandmother, almost every time I saw her, would be like, "Oh, that dog's too big. Why do you have a dog that big? You don't need a dog." She would always just shit talk my dog for no reason. Just want to shit talk my dog. Then she moved in with my parents, and they had Maggie. And then after like 2 or 3 months, my grandmother was like, "I get it now. I'm sorry." She never swore, but she'd be like, "I fucking love this dog. Like, I get it. I'm sorry. And so you love your dog. I understand."
Yeah.
So she was able to. She was self-aware enough to be able to admit when she was wrong. Once.
Yeah. Well, like when she realized that she was wrong, I guess. As soon as she realized she was wrong. But talking about funny telephone stuff. So back in the day, you used to be able to reroute numbers, right? So if you're going away for a while, you could reroute your number to, I don't know, your mate's house or whatever. So get what your crazy grandmother calls. But my gran rerouted it one day, and this is how, like, I thought at the time it was kind of reasonable, but now I know what my mum's like. It is utterly insane. But so she was, so my grandmother was coming to visit, but she hadn't told my mum. My mum thought it was going to be like a few more days, but my grandmother thought, I'll surprise them and I'll come a bit early. So rewrote the phone before she left to our house, because she was going to stay there. And then she drove from Portsmouth to South Wales to come and see us. And then, so my mum's doing what your gran did, called her like 60, 70 times, and the phone was engaged the whole time. She didn't know that she's just calling herself. And then she's like, oh my God, she could be dead. I should call the police, get someone around there. And she's like proper freaking out. So I thought initially, because I was like 7 or 8 years old, I thought, oh, well, I guess that's reasonable or whatever. But then her reaction was bloody crazy. So like when my grandmother eventually arrived, my mum went batshit on her. I was all excited because my grandmother's here. So I'm like, yeah, I get to see grandma. And then mum kicks her out the house and says, go find somewhere to stay. I can't fucking look at you right now. I thought you were dead and all this stuff. And it just kicks her out. She had to stay in a hotel.
So I was you overreacting, and it's your fault?
Yeah. Yeah,
I think that's not normal. Not normal, because I know my parents have had reactions like that where if I come home past curfew, they're worried and they show their worry by being mad.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you cause me any sort of concern?
Yeah, but there's kind of like, there's mad, and then there's absolutely bloody unreasonable. I can't even look at you.
Yeah, and kicking her out of the house is kind of...
Yeah. Like,
dream.
Just a quick story before the end, because we're coming up to an hour. I spent my 15th or 16th birthday on my own because my sister had won some dumb fuck competition. So they had to go to North Wales. And it was around my birthday. And then for no reason, like I swear to God, I hadn't done anything wrong. But my mum said, I'm sick of fucking looking at you. I don't want you around. You're staying here for a week and we're going on holiday. And left me at home. Yeah. And
wow.
So I was...
Imagine saying that to anyone, much less my own child.
I know. And then they left me on my own for my birthday. And then the competition my sister won, it was like some silly like talent competition thing that she'd won over the summer. She didn't even fucking do it anyway. She chickened out.
Oh, families.
So fade to black, you cunt.
Have a good day, fuckface.
You too.
Bye.